of the stuff that had been piled in giant piles had just been pulled out, stuffed in one, stuffed in another. The two of the boats, my boat and a boat that came out of Athens, Greece, we've not heard of any of the luggage from that. None of it at all. But really, that's kind of the minor part of this whole thing, our personal luggage. What really is important is the lives, the tragic loss of life that happened as 750 people were going on a humanitarian mission. And granted, it was a controversial mission. It was a mission that was to challenge government policies, the Israeli government policy, the American government policy that supports the Israeli siege on Gaza. We knew it was a definite threat to Israel, to their policy of holding a population hostage, really, to having a siege of the population, to put such pressure on the people of Gaza. And our purpose was to go and relieve that pressure. But instead, we were attacked. Was it a mission that was worth taking? Was it a mission worth raising all these millions and millions of dollars and buying these ships? Have we seen that there's been any sort of movement from any government about the siege of Gaza? Well, yes, I would say it's really been worth it. It's shown what citizen activism can do. It shows that where men and women around the world decide that they want to change something, and they're willing to put their efforts into it. They're willing to fundraise. They're willing to coordinate nationally and internationally to bring such things as ships to challenge a siege, that indeed we can make some changes. We now have governments of this world who are saying publicly the siege must end. Not that the United States of America government is saying it quite like that yet. We still have to work on that, but we have other nations. I mean, the Norwegian government saying this must end. The Irish government, this must end. The French government saying the siege must end. And you have the Israeli government that today made a major change. It has now opened up the numbers of items that can now come into Gaza. It's now gone from something like 81 items, only 81 items could come into Gaza for these last many years. And they have put another, I think it's 50 items. Things like cookies, jam. I mean, some of strange things that have not ever been able to go into Gaza. The Israeli military that is now, I think, under great scrutiny, not only by the international community, but by the government of Israel. The disproportionate use of force to the threats that are coming. And we certainly saw that during the CAS-led 22-day attack on Gaza, the disproportionate use of force. None of us condone, I don't think, the shooting of rockets, homemade, unguided rockets that are made in Gaza and are shot into Israel. I don't condone that at all. I'm sorry for the 30 people of Israel who over the past 6 years have been killed by those rockets. But when you look at the disproportionate use of force, where in 22 days the Israeli military using U.S. aircraft, F-16s, Apache helicopters, using ammunition, dime bombs, dense inert metal explosives that will slice a person in two, cluster bombs, white phosphorus. When you look at the disproportionate use of force, it's happened again. It happened on these ships. Now we do see on some of the video that when the commandos started rappelling down from the 3 helicopters that were hovering above the Marmara, that indeed they were met by men on the top of the deck that were there to protect the cabin, the captain's cabin, to try to prevent a takeover of that ship for as long as possible. And we did see that there were men that had broken broom handles and had sticks, and some of them had broken off pipes on the railings of that ship, and they beat some of those Israeli soldiers. I don't condone that at all. The captain of the ship actually came out. You know, part of that video, we saw part of it, 5 seconds maybe. 3 or 4 of those Israeli soldiers really getting beaten up. But we don't see that next stage of it. What happened after 5 seconds? We don't see the part where the captain of the ship came out of the captain's cabin and said, "Stop this." And we don't see where the director of IHH, the Turkish NGO, came out and said, "We are not doing this. Stop this. That's not the way we are going to act. Stop beating those soldiers." And we didn't see initially the pictures of the soldiers being brought down to the first aid station that was on the ship. There are some of the photographs that you'll see in the very beginning of the slideshow that show an Israeli soldier that had blood coming off his face that was being treated by the first aid station on the ship. They were treated and they were returned to the Israeli military. It only took about 20 minutes for the Israeli military to take control of the biggest ship. It took about 30 seconds for them to take control of our little boat. The other 4 ships that were in the flotilla, it took anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes to gain control of them. The Israeli military was up against a bunch of peace activists that had their bodies. There was not one Israeli soldier that was shot. There were no weapons that were on board those ships that were pulled out and then used to fire on Israeli soldiers, because there were no weapons at all. Even the weapons that were taken from the Israeli soldiers were not turned on them. They were either thrown overboard or put in the captain's cabin with the ammunition out of it, and then subsequently returned to the Israeli military. The PR spin that the Israeli government has put on this, you know, they have a big PR machine, and they're working overtime to characterize the Israeli soldiers, the commandos, as the victims. That indeed they were attacked as they came on to the ships, as they boarded the ships in international waters. I think that is a very inaccurate characterization of what really had happened. To continue the story of what, after all 6 of the ships were secured by the Israeli military, we all were steamed then toward the Israeli port of Ashdod. Our boat, being the fastest, got in there the first, and our group of 17 people were the first ones to go through Israeli processing. You may have seen on YouTube some of the photographs of us as we were being taken off that boat. We do have a bone to pick with the Israeli government, because by international law, the Geneva Conventions, prisoners are not to be paraded and photographed as they are being shepherded around. So that's another thing we're taking up with them. Those pictures were inappropriate. That if they take us prisoner, they're not supposed to take photographs that are for public consumption. On one level, though, I was kind of glad they got out, because at least you all knew that you know, you could start tracking what people were, you know, some people were safe, but unfortunately not everyone was safe. After the processing of about 3 hours in a giant tent that had been specially set up for that, you know, we all knew that the Israeli government was making plans for the processing of people. They were going to bring the ships in, process all of us, and then ultimately deport us. The intermediate step was, though, to go to prison. And we ended up in a brand new prison in the town of Beersheba, which is kind of down in the desert. It was about an hour and a half drive from the port of Ashdod. Brand new prison. In fact, we were the ones that had to sweep it out. It still had construction dust in it. And we were the ones that had to sweep it and then put our cells together. And like in the United States, we always wonder, what are all these prisons for? You know, we just keep building more and more prisons. And we never really could get out of the Israeli officials who they intend to put in that prison after we left.